Preemption. First, the Supremacy Clause. What does the Supremacy Clause provide? That's right, that federal law trumps state law. And remember, federal law is always the floor. States can be more restrictive than the federal law, but they can never be less restrictive. Okay, federal law is the floor, and states may be more restrictive than the federal law, but never, less. Okay, we have three types of preemption: express, implied, and field. Okay, our express preemption is easy. Federal law simply declares that it preempts state law. For example, federal law regarding cigarette advertising and warnings would preempt any contrary state law, as in Lorillard tobacco. Now let's look at implied preemption, or sometimes called conflicts preemption. This is also easy. If a state and a federal law conflict, which is going to prevail? That's right, the federal law. If in general rule, the state law conflicts with the federal law will prevail. There are three ways in which the federal law may prevail. 1, impossibility. 2, interference. And 3, field. 1, impossibility. 2, interference. And 3, field preemption. What do these mean? Impossibility preemption means it's impossible to comply with both state and federal law at the same time. Impossibility. The law is preempted, the federal law prevails. If it is impossible to comply with federal and state law at the same time, who prevails? Federal law. If we look at the case of the Florida avocado growers versus Paul, we have the state of California imposing a standard to try to prevent avocados that didn't have a certain oil content from being imported into California, challenged by Florida, and the court ruled it was possible for the Florida growers to just allow their avocados to mature a little longer to meet the California standard. Thus, it was possible. So our first type of implied or conflicts preemption is what? That's right, it is impossibility. It is impossible to comply with both federal and state law. In this case, of course, federal law will win. Federal law prevails. And what's our case? Florida avocado growers versus Paul. Florida, just let your avocados grow a little bit longer, and then it will be possible to comply with the California law. Second, interference. Interference preemption. The state law interferes with the federal law, or it is an obstacle to the federal law. Interference preemption. The state law is an obstacle to the federal law, or interferes with the federal law. And our case here is Pacific Gas and Electric. Remember, nuclear power plants. California passed a law that mandated that there be sufficient storage for spent nuclear fuel before new nuclear plants could be built. And guess who challenged this? Of course, people who wanted to build nuclear power plants. However, the court held that this law did not interfere with a federal objective. It wasn't preempted by the Federal Atomic Energy Act because the federal law regulated safety and the states regulated economic questions. Okay, so what's interference preemption? The state law interferes with the federal law, or it is a what? Obstacle to a federal law. And our case is Pacific Gas and Electric. No, this doesn't conflict with federal law. The Atomic Energy Act regulates safety, and California is just regulating disposal of their spent fuel. It's economic. Finally, we have field preemption, meaning federal law occupies the entire, that's right, field of law. Arizona versus the United States. So we have an Arizona immigration law, which was quite restrictive. And this conflicted with federal immigration law. Federal immigration law fully occupied the field. All right, so we have three types of preemption. Well, we've got our express preemption, and then we have our implied or conflicts preemption. And for that, we have three types. One, that's right, impossibility. Impossible to comply with both laws at the same time. Two, interference. The state law, that's right, interferes with or is what? That's right, an obstacle to the federal law. And three, field preemption. The federal law fully occupies the field. The federal law fully regulates that industry or that area of law, as in immigration, Arizona versus the United States. All right, one more time. Supremacy clause. What prevails? Over a state law, the federal law or the Constitution will always prevail if there's a conflict. That is our general rule. And our sub-rule is the federal law is the floor and the states may be, that's right, more restrictive, but not more lenient. Then we have preemption, express and implied. Express preemption means the federal law just expressly, by its terms, preempts state law. As in which case? That's right, lower-lard tobacco. Federal law regarding cigarette advertising and warnings about tobacco would conflict with any state law. What prevails if there's express preemption? Federal law. All right, what about our three types of implied or conflicts preemption? Impossibility, interference, or field preemption. One, impossibility means it is, that's right, impossible to comply with both laws at the same time. Florida avocado growers versus Paul. Interference preemption. The state law, that's right, interferes with the federal law or is an obstacle to the federal law. And three, field preemption. The federal law occupies the entire, that's right, field. And that's it for preemption.